We're finished with progressive talk. Actually, there's one more. So the Buddha starts out with talking about generosity, sila, moves on to heaven, and then the dangers of sensuality, the benefits of renunciation. And usually at that time, the audience's mind is calmed down, it's settled, they're open to hearing more. And then that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's where he introduces to them that teaching which is unique to the Tathagatas, to the Buddhas. This generosity and sila, renunciation, these things are not particularly unique to Buddhism, but the Four Noble Truths are. It's what makes Buddhism stand out. And so today I think that's what we'll touch on. And usually at this time people become sotapannas and so forth, so that's my utmost goal, if you're not there already. And so the Four Noble Truths is really what the Buddha had woke up to and realized. And it's almost like a medical approach to the mind, to life. The first noble truth being dukkha, which has two flavors. The first is suffering, things that are painful, things we don't want, and then unsatisfactoriness, those things that are pleasant to us, those things that we do like, but which will never quite fill us up, which will never quite be enough. The second noble truth is tanha, craving. This is the cause of dukkha. And so the first noble truth is kind of the issue, the ailment, the sickness, the poison. The second noble truth is the cause. The third noble truth is the cure, the release from that ailment, that sickness. And the fourth noble truth is the administering, the cure, the path to bring about that cure. So we'll go through each of the Four Noble Truths, starting with dukkha. And what is dukkha? Well, dukkha is birth, it's aging, it's death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, depression, despair, all of the unwanted things that we experience in our life. This is dukkha. And it's quite profound, I think, that the Buddha, it's quite clear, I know we all know that life has suffering in it, but for the Buddha to point it out and say, hey, why is that the case? What is the cause of it? How can we make it stop? And I imagine that if there was a way to live eternally, yet there be no dukkha, maybe the Buddha might have opted for that, I don't know. But it seemed very much that to bring about the end of dukkha, it also means bringing about existing itself, bringing birth and aging to a close altogether. He also talks about how not to get what we want is dukkha, and also getting what we don't want, this is also dukkha. I remember when I was a kid, it was a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese's, pizza, friends around, and I wanted a particular gift, particular Star Wars game, and they gave me a Star Wars game, but it was not that one. And just how unwanted I remember that feeling. I still got something, it was still a happy event, but that was just enough to sour the entire event for me. And how our expectations of the world really make our lives more difficult to live. So this is dukkha. I think all of us are familiar with it to one degree or another. The cause of dukkha is tanha, and this is translated often as craving, but it could also mean the thirst, that unquenchable thirst. Because for a long time, we've been trying to quench our thirst with the wrong method, by sensuality, by seeking out material possessions, pleasant experiences, at worst, unpleasant experiences if you're a masochist, hopefully not. And the Buddha looked back quite far after his awakening. Due to his mental strength and power, he looked back in his past lives, and he could not find a single point where before that, beings were not fettered by craving, fettered by ignorance. But for him it didn't really matter. could only see what was going on now and what had been going on for a long time. And his main interest was, how can I bring this to a close? How can I quench this thirst? How can I bring about the end of dukkha? And this craving is a very productive mechanism because it leads to rebirth. When people say, how does rebirth happen? It is this very innate, very primal, very fundamental mechanism that causes us to reach out, to constantly go forward. And this is what propels us from life to life. Not being satisfied, wanting more sensuality. This is the first one that talks about kama tanha, craving for sensuality, craving for sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, but also craving for existence. Craving and wanting to keep the existence we have, but at the time of death, I imagine cessation is quite scary. The ending of things is scary for people. So a being seeks out further. And then the third type of tanha, which is talked about, is vibhava tanha, which is craving not to becoming, craving for non-existence. And a person who would commit suicide might be close to this, or people who get quite depressed and no longer want to live might be abiding in vibhava tanha. It's also something that monastics can fall into quite a lot because we're kind of finished. Where's the exit? Exit stage left, please, as soon as possible. But simply wanting to not exist anymore is not enough. Which brings us to the third noble truth, which is cessation. And this is where Buddhism really becomes a religion of hope, that there is a way to not only reduce, but bring about the end of our craving, bring about the end of dukkha. So he talks about the remainderless fading away and cessation of that very craving, the craving for sensuality and existence and non-existence. He talks about its relinquishment, its release, the letting go of the very conditions that keep us bound to samsara. To give a grim example, it's like, people would say, oh, it's like being in a prison. Well, no. It's like you're in a prison, but you're not locked up. You're just holding on to the chain. It's about releasing what's keeping you bound up to these conditions, if that be your wish. And so this is really the cure. And lastly, it's how do we bring about this cessation? How do we administer this cure? How do we practice in a certain way that leads us to the end of craving? Well, this is the Noble Eightfold Path that the Buddha woke up to, realized, developed. And so we have the disease, the illness, the cause of the disease, the cure, and how to administer the cure. And when I first read this, when I was about 16 years old, I said, what else to do in this life? What else is worth doing? If we see the depressions that we fall into or the dissatisfaction that we have in our lives, what else is more important than mental health, happiness, contentment? And that the Buddha laid out such a clear path, such a clear plan, such a clear course of action to make that happen. And of course it will not be easy for lay practitioners and monastics alike, but with clear intention and with effort and with time, slowly, we can begin to put into practice the fourth noble truth. We can begin to experience cessation slowly, the letting go, the relinquishment. We can see the causes of dukkha. He said these four truths are to be The first one is to be completely understood. We need to completely understand suffering. We need to abandon the cause of suffering. Cessation we need to see for ourselves, to verify it for ourselves. And the path of practice is to be fully developed. And this is the teaching that has echoed to us for 2,500 years, 2,600 years. So, having said that, I gave a series of talks that, if put together, can help us lead fulfilling lives.